politics of this country can be very interesting. Professor Kithure Kindiki, who is the senator for Tharaka, was finally removed as the deputy speaker of the Senate. And it was a very interesting debate on the floor of the House. And tomorrow, I'll do a comprehensive analysis on the impact of that removal, especially the impact it will have on Uhuru Kenyatta and William Samoei Ruto, and the politics, and how it's going to affect the politics in the larger Mount Kenya region. But I made several observations, and that's what I want us to look at today. But for the first time, at least you are able to understand why Uhuru Kenyatta decided to remove Professor Kithure Kindiki as the deputy speaker. This is a man who played a key role in saving President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy during the ICC time. This is the same man who actually led the crafting of Jubilee coalition between URP and TNA. And it's also the same man who actually crafted the Jubilee constitution when these parties came together. And he was rewarded as the Senate majority leader. But today, finally, we were told why Uhuru is mad at him.
We used the mobile that was in the party's records. After failing to attend that meeting, there was no apology that was rendered to our party. And we do have minutes which were signed by myself and His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta, the party leader of Jubilee Coalition. Mr. Speaker, sir, we serve in these positions, having been given this position by parties, and therefore, when parties lose confidence in you, they have every right to withdraw that support. Remember, Mr. Speaker, sir, when Jubilee Party supported Professor in that position, there was no reasons that were given at all. There was no framing of charges. So in the same manner, when the parties feel they don't have confidence in the Deputy Speaker, we should also be allowed to do the same. Mr. Speaker, sir, another reason why the party has felt it does not have confidence with Professor is the events that happened on 26 February 2020 in this House. What happened, Mr. Speaker, sir? On that day, a motion was brought by the then Majority Leader, Kipchumba Murkomen. That motion was what we call an adjournment motion. It was discussing the transfer of functions from Nairobi City County to national government. Then, after the debate, a ruling was rendered by Professor. The effect of that ruling was that this Senate, some certain committee should proceed to investigate that matter.
But what shocked me most, and I didn't really expect, was the fact that Mutula Kilonzo Jr. was the man who seconded the removal of Kithure Kindiki. And in his speech, he made it very clear that there was nothing they could do as long as the Senate, the House, didn't have the confidence of Kithure Kindiki. But there was some drama between Kipchumba Murkomen and James Orengo. But I want to quote what James Orengo was saying.
We are talking about issues of principle or yesteryear fighters for democracy. Mr. Speaker, if you look at motions and bills which have come in this Senate, the last Senate, and this Senate, and look at how we have voted, those who are today talking about democracy, if I take every bill, in fact, I collected many of the bills that were passed in the last Senate and this Senate, the security law amendment bills, the election law amendment bills, the issue of Tharaka land. How did they vote on that day? How did they vote on that day? They talk about democracy everywhere until they lose their positions. How strange is that? On matters of principle. And I agree on matters of principle. You can judge me 100 times, but when it comes on a matter of principle, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you that I will never change. I'll never change. These are all politics of power. There are no politics of principle here. It's all about power. And why do I say so? The meeting that was held in State House, just look at the people who attended and those who did not attend. It tells a story.
And there were light moments on the floor of the House when Kipchumba Murkomen actually responded to James Orengo after James Orengo had termed him as a very junior person when it comes to matters law.
Over and over again insulted me and insulted my education.
Order.
Mr. Speaker,
Order,
and you have kept quiet. No, let me raise my point of order.
What's your point of order?
Mr. Speaker, Senator Orengo is over and over again repeating and doubting my practice of law or, Mr. Speaker, my knowledge of law. Mr. Speaker, Senator Orengo and I went to the same university, even if the difference was 26 years. I got a second upper. Senator Orengo got a second law. I have 2 master's degree, he has none. I have taught 2 students, Mr. Speaker. I have taught 2 students, Mr. Speaker, who are in this house.
Order,
Who is he to lecture me? Who is he?
But besides all those drama, there are political lessons which we can learn from what happened to Kithure Kindiki. I made several observations. And in my view, number one thing which I've observed is that if I were the ally or an advisor to William Samoei Ruto and his Tanga team, then the best thing they could have done was to ask Kithure Kindiki to resign from that position. Because of course, they've now been exposed. They could have avoided that kind of embarrassment. The embarrassment where someone like even the Narok senator, Oledama, now deciding not to side with them. These are the same people who supported Oledama, and Oledama decided to dump them on the floor of the House. So in my view, Professor Kithure Kindiki was a man, based on what the senators were saying, is a man of integrity. He didn't commit any single mistake. And just like Orengo put it, this was a mere power games in Jubilee Party. So Professor Kithure Kindiki being kicked out, unable to get the support of fellow senators, in my view, was embarrassing. So if I were the allies of the DP, or if I were the DP himself, or even his advisor, I would have advised Tanga to advise this guy the moment those 52 signatures were collected to resign, so that he didn't have to go through this kind of embarrassment. He again addressed the Senate, but despite that, what is on record is that he has been removed successfully. So that's one thing I've observed, and in my view, it was a mistake for Team Tanga to allow this guy to proceed, because what they wanted actually was to prove a point that despite their number, which they knew was so small, they just wanted to prove a point. But the question Kenyans are asking, what point can Kipchumba Murkomen prove to Kenyans? This is a guy who, for the last 7 years, was part and parcel of the impunity. He was supporting the impunity of this, which were being meted in this country. What point can Susan Kihika tell people? Is it just because now the heat has been turned to the other side? So in my view, there was no point they were going to relay. Of course, they've delivered very powerful speeches, but Kenyans are not, majority of Kenyans are not sympathetic to them, unless those who subscribe to Team Tanga. So they ought to have saved the professor from this embarrassment. Number two, it has also exposed Tanga and the numbers. Do they have the numbers? And if they have the numbers, why couldn't they save this guy? Tanga has been on record that indeed they have the numbers. Where are the numbers? If you look at the way that particular debate, who are supporting Kithure Kindiki? So the mere fact that these guys have decided to expose the lack of numbers, assuming this debate ended before going to the floor of the House by this guy resigning, people would have just speculated that this guy was supposed to be removed, but again he failed. He resigned. So no debate, no numbers. So now Kenyans know that Team Tangatanga don't have numbers at the Senate. The other thing which I'm observing is that William Ruto and his team have a very big problem. They don't have leadership, both at the Senate and at the National Assembly. Maybe Duale is kind of a leader. But look at a situation where Professor Kithure Kindiki, a man who is highly respected in the legal fraternity, a man who lectured Irungu Kangata, a man who lectured so many members of parliament, being subjected to this kind of embarrassment, but without even the support of fellow senators. That's very embarrassing. In my view, it has exposed Team Tangatanga. Ruto must start figuring out and get people who are stable enough, people who can reach out to the other side. I was surprised, and I indicated that someone like Mutula Kilonzo, for example, were the people who seconded the motion. In an ordinary circumstance, if these guys were organized, then they would have even managed to get 2 or 3 NASA senators on their side, people who are going to speak and talk very passionately about the need for the democracy to prevail in this country. They couldn't. So what's the work of Kipchumba Murkomen? Was Kipchumba Murkomen waiting for an opportunity to impress Kenyans by talking big about democracy? That's not how things are done. That's not how things are done. So there's lack of leadership in Team Tangatanga. And in my view, that's a very big problem. I don't know how the DP and his team are going to deal with it. In my view, people like even the independent senator, they're around 2 or 3, ought to have been prevailed upon by even the Tangatanga guys to save this guy. But who are defending this guy? The Bomet senator, the Elgeyo Marakwet senator, the Kericho senator, just allies of the DP, the Nakuru senator. Basically, it was being supported only by Team Tangatanga. So basically, it means they were only supporting him for the fear that if they didn't do, then they were going to be in problems. And lastly, I think party loyalty. Kenyans, as a country, we must start talking about party loyalty. If you are elected on ODM party, and you have a problem with ODM party, the way they are conducting their business, then what should you do? Should you resign, or should you just continue the fight? That's a talk that as a country we must discuss. And this guy, the senator for Narok, mentioned loyalty, and he actually used the floor of the house to swear his loyalty to Raila Odinga. But I think as a country we must start drawing the line about party politics. Are we going to be parliamentary, or are we still presidential? And if you're parliamentary, at what point do you disagree with your party? As a country, we must agree to discuss the party loyalty, party politics. Should, for example, Aisha Jumwa be allowed to use ODM as a political party to get elected as a member of parliament, and once elected, he then goes outside there and starts supporting or opposing the same party? Or should people like Aisha Jumwa then be allowed to exercise that democracy because we are in a democratic state country? Those are discussions which you must have. And if you know that you can't toe the party line, then what should you do? We must have all those. And that's why sometimes I fail to understand what Kenyans are actually looking at in this referendum, because those are some of the issues which are taking this country down. I don't know what you think, but tomorrow I want to do a proper analysis on what happened at the Senate, the impact it's going to have on Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto. Because from what I can see clearly, a war has erupted, and that war is not going to end soon. Thank you, guys.